Welcome to the online book fair open mic with Irene Watson, author of award-winning book The Sitting Swing, Finding Wisdom to Know the Difference, published by Loving Healing Press. Irene was born and raised in a tiny hamlet of Reno in the northern area of the province of Alberta in Canada. She received her master's degree in psychology with honors from Regis University, Denver, and currently lives in Austin, Texas with her husband, Robert. Also the president of Higher Powering Foundation, Inc., and facilitator of transformative women's retreats and workshops through rewriting life scripts. She brings 40 years of life-changing experiences, facilitation, and study into her hands-on programs. Irene is also the managing editor of Reader Views, a book review and author publicity service. Please welcome today's guest, Irene Watson.
It was the damnedest thing that they thought I'd fall for. A video camera in plain sight in one corner of the room, pointing right on everything I'd be doing for the next 28 days. Not likely. I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't bother hiding the thing. Even a hanging plant in front of it might have kept me from noticing it for an hour or two, but they didn't even try. And that was the real weakness as far as I was concerned. Here they were, helping some of the most messed up people you can imagine, people addicted to just about anything, and they thought if they had a camera watching these people get dressed, watching them sleep, that they would just reveal everything about themselves in an instant? Some experts. I decided to wonder why I paid good money to be here. But there it is. Well, all I wanted to do is fit in. I had many friends graduate from this utopian little institute, and they all swore it would change their lives. They all used Avalon talk, as I called it, and catchphrases and jargon used by the Avalon Center. Tiring as it was to listen to their new language, they were my friends, and it was even more of a challenge to be outside the group in that way. So I decided to call some of my own challenges addictions and make the trip here. 28 days of dealing with real addicts. Then I could graduate and get back on the inside track with my friends. Yes, things were off to a terrific start. My best course of action was becoming clearer all the time. Give them some things about me to play with, to feel that I could fit in. Show how happy I was to have my problems resolved and what a different person I would be at graduation. That way, I would be opening up to people like Gabby or to people who would put cameras in my room. And along the way, I could make use of the retreat, open up, perhaps, and even spend some time in personal reflection. Then, at graduation, maybe I could be different. They could let me go believing that they made a difference, and I would leave knowing I made a difference on my own. But that's not how it worked at all. I'm now going to read chapter 8 for you. And this is an experience that I had as a child. Dad had hitched up Dolly and Jessie, checked that the reins and harnesses were all strapped up correctly, looked up to the gray sky one time, then stepped up into the wagon. Mom and I stood in front of the house, as we often did, to see him off, and he nodded curtly at us before flicking the reins and moving the wagon. He'd been gone maybe half an hour when it started to rain, so Mom and I moved from the garden into the house. Mom tidied up for a few minutes while the rain turned steady and seemed to be settling in for a long day of tireless soaking. I watched it through a window and saw little streams forming in the dirt paths around the house. Then came the downpour. People today know what rain sounds like on a shingled roof. It is a sound many of us are in love with. It makes for the best nights of falling asleep or the best mornings of sleeping in, if we are so lucky to have that opportunity. But the sound of the rain on the shingles is very different from the sound of the rain on a wooden roof that seem to absorb the impact and the sound, perhaps only because it is thicker than shingles over plywood. When the rain poured down in buckets on that solid wooden house of ours, the sound was awesome and glorious. As I stood at the window that day, I closed my eyes and listened for the music of the pelting rain. Then the ground shook with thunder, and that music was to my ears as well. Thunder. Was there anything quite so powerful? The sky lit up a few times each minute, and the thunder clapped behind the light. And my little 4-year-old brain got to working. What was it that could make this such a sound? So I asked, "Mama, where does thunder come from?" When I turned around, I saw my mother was standing nervously by the window that looked out on our front pathway, out to where my dad had stepped into the wagon not long ago. Mom looked sideways at me. "Someplace everything comes from," she said flatly, something different in her voice. "God makes the thunder. He makes it when he's angry and stomps his feet about in heaven." She turned back to the window and kept staring. God was angry? That was a scary thought. If he had made everything, having an angry God had to be a dangerous situation. It made me wonder, and I asked out loud, "Why is God angry? What makes him angry?" Mom let out a sigh through her nose. She didn't turn to me this time. "He gets angry because people are bad. When people do bad things, God stumps his feet in heaven." She went silent again, and I got to thinking. There weren't too many people around where we lived. Not even in town. There were only a handful of families and shops. So if God was angry with someone around here, chances were good I'd done something to upset him. I must have been bad. But what could I have done to create such thunderstorms as this? I couldn't fathom a thing. But God was often a critical part of Mom's answers about things, so she must have known God pretty well. If he were angry, I knew it was with me. So I had to figure out what I had done wrong and make sure that I didn't pull that off again. Suddenly, the thrilling sound of a downpour on the roof turned into startling sound of something more, as if our roof was going to collapse around us. I looked quickly out the window and saw massive balls of hail clattering to the ground, crashing and bouncing in sudden heaps across our pathway, out into the garden and as far as I could see through the sheets of falling white. And then I heard it, a sound I'd never met and a sound I had hoped I would never meet again. My mother, sturdy, solid, controlled, began to whimper out loud. As I looked her way, I saw her lose strength and sink slowly to her knees beside the window as her body shook. My eyes squinted to make sure I was seeing what I thought I was seeing. Was it real? I crept toward my mother with my hand held out. As I reached her, I touched her shoulder and said, "What is it, Mama? Why are you crying?" She sniffled and took a few gasping breaths. "Your father," she managed to say. "If he is caught in this..." She didn't continue. She didn't need to. I understood exactly what it meant to be caught under a storm of hail like this. But there was something worse than the notion of my father in the storm. The notion of why the storm had hit us at all. Was God that angry with me? Mom rose suddenly to her feet and rummaged around the kitchen things. She pulled out a cast-iron frying pan and walked quickly to the door. Carefully, she opened the door just enough to slide the pan through. When she held it out to catch some of the hail, within seconds the hail stopped falling, and my mom brought the pan back indoors. "You have to try to catch the hail," she told me. "You have to use a cast-iron pan. Then it will stop." It was incredible to think he would stop God from being so angry with just a cast-iron pan. But the proof was in my mother's cast-iron frying pan full of hail. Mom had somehow managed to stop the storm. I would always remember, stop hail with a frying pan. Mom sat down wearily in the chair. We both knew Dad would still be on his way to town when the hail struck. It would only take 1 or 2 hailstones that size to knock him out, and the rest would finish the job. Neither of us cried. But Mom wrapped her arms around me and we sat there quietly, wondering what we would do. It was some hours later when Dad pulled up on a dirt path with Dolly and Jessie. The storm did not hit as wildly as we thought. Mom and I were astonished to be sure that my dad was gone for good. We ran out to meet him, but he just drove the horses slowly, surveying the slush that had buried our yard, our garden, our fields, and the acres of crops. Then when he neared us, he pulled up on the reins and got out of the stand beside us, silent because he was looking. Everything? Asked my mom quietly. Dad nodded. Yes, it's all gone. I wasn't more than 4 years old, but the tone in their voices told me they were desperate, and so was I. Because I was inkling, Dad? He looked sadly into my eyes. Where does hail come from? He breathed deeply. When God gets really angry with people, he told me, he throws hail down from heaven. So I was right. I didn't just cause the thunder, I caused the hail too. And because of that hail, we had lost nearly everything, our garden and all of our crops. I knew we depended on those crops to buy food in town. I knew we depended on them for our flour. I knew we depended on the garden for all of our vegetables and for everything my mom preserved for the winter use. It was all gone because I had done something bad. That was it. I knew it. I suddenly knew, and the tears began to stream down my face. I had stolen a cookie from the cookie jar, and my parents were being punished for what I had done. I would never have thought that God would be so angry for such a little thing, but the thunder and the hail said it all. And now, as I looked across the fields, I knew I had destroyed the excerpt that I had just read of my experience with the hail and thunderstorm. It's just one of the memories that I recalled while I was at Avalon. And needless to say, it was quite a journey. So the rest of the book after that just sort of gives some indication of my experience at Avalon and my resistance as well, and some interesting information as how I actually did the journey. And what I want to do is read this last paragraph of chapter 35, and this was my huge awakening. God has somehow stepped in. He lifted the veil for us to look beyond and see what it was all most truly about. I could only feel love. In fact, it seemed I was love, and nothing else at all mattered. I was completely absorbed and my body shook. It could not handle the power that was suddenly my only reality. So was great with relief. It could only be compared to a cool shower after a day in the desert sun. It minimized and yet made more spectacular each one of life's smallest pleasures. Birds singing in the morning, a fire roaring in the winter, a blaze of the autumn leaves, the gurgling of a brook. It was all these things all at once. It was infinitely more. Jean and I lay on the bed for an hour or so, absorbing it all. And at last, when we calmed just a little, I told her I had work to do. I had a script to write. I had a new response to life. And at last, my big ego would not write the script. Love would write my script. And I knew from then on, things were going to be okay.